Another one I thought I'd go into, right? Just thought I'd throw this out there because, listen, I know Rich isn't primarily in the world of journalism. He does the odd piece that sort of is like an op-ed. So maybe he might have some thoughts on this and maybe he can bounce off this a little bit. In the field of journalism, don't worry, we're not people who are somehow extricated from this. In fact, I'd say, in certain senses, because I consider a journalist to have a moral and professional responsibility to disclose any relationships they have, I actually think it's outrageous how many journalists basically are balls deep within this or don't disclose like personal relationships. In fact, people might not know this. I have had to, on League of Legends talk shows, repeatedly mention that when I talk about what is, I would say, almost objectively a great feature, that ProView concept that they came out with, where you could watch the POVs, I have to mention I technically own stock in the company that created ProView, because it wasn't Riot that created it. It was actually a Swedish company called Snipe. And the reason I mention that is because I'm bigging up how brilliant it is. Like, there's an obvious reason where that would be ludicrous if I didn't say it, right? And then went around calling other people on their bullshit. Well, there's a very big esports journalist. And you know what? I'll allude to what I said before, but if you piss us off, I would have just made some sort of clever comment that morons wouldn't even have gotten about how I'm sure he's howling laughing. It's Jacob Wolf, of course. Now, this individual, all I'll say is this: since he decided to call me out on what is objectively not a conflict of interest, and he totally misunderstood, I'd disclosed completely my connection between Flashpoint. Obviously, I could call up my competitor. That's not even a conflict of interest there, really. You could maybe say it is in terms of if you're a journalist, if you hadn't disclosed it. Like, if I'm a journalist and I call out ESL, I don't tell you I work for a competitor, yeah, I can see that one, but I've disclosed it. I've made it pretty obvious. I'd also even say I've got skin in the game. I don't know if people noticed, but even while I worked for them, I was calling out Flashpoint. And by the way, the owners didn't like that. There's probably a reason they didn't give me what I wanted for that last fucking contract. So what I'll say is this, right? Well, you know what? If you want to go out there and put out things that you've heard or things, just ideas popping into your head, how about I just mention this? First of all, where's Jacob Wolf in my game, CSGO? It's one of the biggest games in the entire world, right? I'm not going to say I know the number of stories he's made, but I would be shocked if he's done 10 stories in CSGO. And if he's done 10, they weren't the blockbuster ones, mate. Some of them were small ones. I even saw he did one about Flashpoint. I actually know part of the information was incorrect. Then I'll just say this. The reason why that's interesting to me is because the great journalists, I don't even consider myself one in the terms of investigative journalism, because what I do is I do a little bit of what the investigative journalist does, but I essentially just turn around and I use it to inform my op-eds, my opinion pieces. Someone like Richard obviously absolutely then has to nail every detail down. He can't just go, well, this is what I'm thinking or what I've heard. If he reports it, there's a reason why he has an insane record. Like, people have very rarely ever shown evidence that he was wrong, which means he doesn't go first on every story. Sometimes stories never come out, believe it or not. There's amazing stories that, couldn't get it over the line the last 5%. One of the stories I've heard, which is kind of an industry legend at this point in time about Jacob Wolf, is when you look at the massive orgs, particularly in League of Legends, that he always has the fucking story for. He always has the massive player that's joining. Or bizarrely, he knows that, in a way that might, fuck with the player, that this player's leaving. The behind the scenes in the industry, the logic goes, people just say, well, of course, he's in the pocket of X, Y, and Z owner, or he has a relationship with X, Y, and Z owner, so certain stories maybe don't get published, certain stories do get published, maybe the way they're framed gets published that way. Again, I'm not actually claiming on that one. You'll notice I was very clever with the way I phrased that there. I'm not claiming that's a fact. I'm not claiming it's something I know for a certainty. But you know what? We're all just saying things we think about the industry, right, Jacob? It's fun. It's fun to do that, isn't it? So round two, maybe? Nah, I don't. Listen, that's not even all the nukes in the silo, mate. So I just,
No.
I thought the weird...
you got
Oh, sorry, go on.
Sorry, go for it, mate.
Okay, I was just going to say, I thought the weird thing about Jacob Wolf calling you out for a conflict of interest is one of these things where, even though I was pretty sure of what I had read, I read it a couple of times to make sure. And to me, he was kind of describing the absolute polar opposite of what a conflict of interest was. It was like you were literally, if anything, you were literally attacking your direct competitor, which is presumably, in my opinion, that would be like the complete opposite. But I actually have a weird story involving Jacob, which isn't actually calling out Jacob specifically himself. I actually think that Jacob was maybe even weirdly somehow like a victim in this as well. But during
I know where we're going. Yeah, let's do it.
During the period of time when we just before franchising, obviously a lot of people might know, H2K were basically the main proponents of franchising, at least publicly, pushing it just mainly on the premise of the financial model and how
it was unsustainable, right?
Yeah, just completely unsustainable and whatever. And obviously, Richard Lippy, who was the controlling owner of H2K, was very outspoken, very unfiltered. He was just basically in a nice, articulate way, just shitting on Riot at any possible moment he could publicly about the areas in which he felt they'd gone wrong. And during this time, ESPN reached out to us to speak to Richard Lippy about all of these issues. And this was during the time just prior to Disney getting a controlling interest in ESPN. But this had already been booked like months in advance. So basically, Richard went to New York and sat down with Jacob Wolf, who was at the time working for ESPN. And they did this huge thing, fancy cameras, whatever, loads of different recording software, blah, 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 like multi-man crew. This wasn't just Jacob with a fucking webcam, over Zoom or some shit. And he did this long interview with ESPN, and it never saw the light of day. And the story and to my understanding, because obviously I spoke to Richard afterwards, whatever, he went ham. He just went ham on Riot. He basically said things he'd never said publicly before about, certain immoral things that he felt that they were doing, like player rights, where he feels Riot's responsibility should be in policing certain aspects. And of course, covered all the financial side or whatever. And it just got completely buried. And obviously we went to Jacob, what's going wrong? Why are you trying to cover it up? And weirdly, before the interview happened, Susan, someone else who, she was the CEO of H2K at the time, also an investor, she said to me, I bet you because she was there in person with him, I believe, she said, this will never see the light of day. Disney will shut this down. Because for anyone who doesn't know, this was just prior to, Disney obviously then investing massively into League of Legends, right? And Jacob, when we confronted him on this, because obviously he was the first point of contact, was like, no, you don't understand. The files all got corrupted. Everything got corrupted. And bearing in mind, there was a multi-man camera crew there, right? Obviously different recording devices for audio.
Contingencies, basically. Yeah, people might have seen, there's always another mic you can pick up on when you have those setups.
Because we said to him, is okay, even if, let's just hypothesize that magically the video from every camera is dead. Okay, sure. What about the audio? The audio will do. I'm no, it's all lost because it all got put in the same it all got put in the same cloud folder, and that just exploded or whatever. These people had never made backup copies in their life or something. And I genuinely believe that he believed what he was saying. So in this case, I'm not saying Jacob Wolf buried the story, right? But to me, it was very clear that because of the conflict of interest that was arising between again, people forget that Disney now basically owns ESPN and their relationship with Riot and this huge investment and the millions that they pumped into Team Liquid and into the League of Legends space in general. This was just completely buried and never spoken about. So for people as well who generally have this, viewpoint of, I don't want to get into the sort of fake news meme or whatever, sure, but all the stuff that, does get leaked, think of all the things that don't get leaked or don't ever see the light of day, which are just being perpetually buried by the people in the companies.
Another type of gatekeeping. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And I mean, I actually, what would have been probably the biggest story in my career, definitely at that point, it was in 2019. I spoke to plenty of people involved with one of the companies that Jens owns and operates. And there was a lot of bullshit going on there, maybe some misogyny, maybe a bit of sexual harassment, maybe not taking mental health too seriously, and a bunch of just bullshit that might go on, right? And I reached out for a comment, didn't get anything. A week later, put it live. This is while I was at Esports Insider, and then within 20 minutes, he somehow got my phone number and was calling me, and you're taking that down right now, blah, blah, blah. You've not spoken to me, you didn't reach out for comment, all this kind of shit. And then threatened the company I was working for with legal action. They got taken down within an hour, maybe 2 hours max. So it's so easy for them as well to just basically gatekeep what information can get out there and can kind of control the narrative. So unless Deserto want to take that story on, and then the inevitable lawsuit that will come from it, there's just a bunch of stuff there that it won't get publicized, and that's the power they have.
Yeah, it's
a load of these people.
It's the concept of being the big stack in poker, right? It's you can afford to go all in this case, or not go all in, but you can afford to bet big, which in this case would be calling legal action, right? When you're the big stack. If you're the little stack and you're all inning, that hand is going to get dragged out beyond your means. You're going to get put into a separate pot at a certain point where it's you can't make any money beyond this point because you didn't have it to begin with, right? And that's what these huge companies do. That's what Riot is doing right now with this lawsuit against all these women, the gender discrimination case. And that, I mean, that gets some coverage, but even that doesn't get discussed about enough in the style of terms that I think
the mainstream people.